Hi, I'm Adam with IT Professionals of Iowa, and today I wanted to talk about business class firewalls or business class routers. There's several names for them: firewall, router, next gen firewall, or UTM, which stands for Unified Threat Management. Now, the difference between a consumer grade router and a business grade router or firewall is I like to compare the consumer grade firewall or router as to a white picket fence. It'll keep the neighborhood dog out, but really it's not going to stop an intruder or a burglar or something like that. Whereas a business grade firewall is more like the electrified chain link fence. There's a lot more layers of security to it, and we're going to talk about those here. So your standard consumer grade router is designed for anybody to be able to take it home, plug it in, and have it just work. Now, in order to make that a possibility, they have to be configured with the least amount of security, with the bare minimums, because otherwise the advanced security options get kind of complicated, and if you set it up wrong, you can block all traffic, and we certainly don't want that. So a business class firewall or a next gen firewall offers a lot more, such as they have antivirus right on the firewall. You can get phishing scam blocking, you can get spam filters for email, you can get reporting, which is a big thing for requirements as far as like compliance, so PCI or HIPAA compliance. You need reporting, which consumer grade firewalls don't provide enough in the reporting area, such as like the time length of logs. So for example, a consumer grade firewall may only hold logs for a couple days or 24 hours. Business grade firewalls can hold them for months at a time or a year. And they also have options to send those logs to other places, such as a local server or something like that. Some other things they have are VPN, so remote access. You can set up remote access with secure remote access with a business grade firewall. So it usually requires a piece of software installed on the end user machine. They can use that to connect, whether they're at a coffee shop or a client office or something like that. You can use that to connect back to the office and access the resources there, whether it be a file server or programs on your work computer or what have you. Excuse me. You don't want to use it's not good practice to use a business grade laptop where you're passing business information at, say, a coffee shop without a VPN. It's very easy to gain access to that data if you don't, whereas if you use a VPN, it's a secure tunnel back to your office where they have a business grade firewall, hopefully, and that traffic is much more protected. Some other things you can do with a business grade router, especially if you get into more users, if you get 10, 15 or more users, or if you have a limited internet bandwidth, you can do bandwidth shaping or bandwidth control, where you can allocate certain amounts of bandwidth for VoIP phones, or Sonos is a big one that uses a lot of bandwidth to play music. You can allocate certain amounts of traffic so those other applications won't interrupt day-to-day work activities. So you could deprioritize or lower the priority on, say, YouTube streaming rather than VoIP calls, where VoIP calls should be highest priority in order to have the highest quality phone call. Some other things you can do on a business grade firewall are what's called VLANs or virtual networks. So you can split the networks into different segments for more. You can do it for security if you use access control with that as well. It's also nice if you have large networks. You can put so VoIP phones, for example, on their own part of the network in order to isolate that traffic. And again, it gives you better quality and it reduces chatter on the local network for desktop use and things like that. You can also do application controls. You can block certain web applications for productivity. So let's say you wanted to block Facebook or only for certain hours, allow it over the lunch hour, or you could also block by category, whether you want to block adult content or you want to block gambling or those types of things. You have those options at the firewall level. And you can also do ad blocking at the edge too at your router. So security should always be thought of in layers. The more you can block at the edge before it gets inside the network, the better. the less work the antivirus and those things on the computers have to do. But just because you have a business grade firewall doesn't mean you don't need all of the other standards. You still need to make sure your Windows and third-party software are updated. You need to make sure you have good business grade managed antivirus at the endpoints at the computers. You also need to have user training and let them know, this is what a scam email looks like, or this is what a phishing email looks like. This is how you detect a bad link. Another thing, speaking of updates, consumer grade routers rarely will have more than one firmware update, if that, in their lifespan. Whereas business grade equipment, usually you can get updates monthly, sometimes quarterly, or a couple times a year, which is great for when new vulnerabilities are discovered in those devices. They're patched frequently or quickly on business class equipment, whereas with consumer grade equipment, you're pretty much on your own. And there's a couple reasons for that. The business grade equipment, the manufacturers know it's going to be in place for a while. It needs to be compliant, it needs to be secure, and it needs to be manageable. Consumer grade equipment, they pretty much figure once it's set up, nobody's going to go in and check for updates. And if they do, they're not going to know how to do them. So consumer grade equipment is good for consumer. It does its job. But if you're running a business of any size, you really need to have a business class firewall in place. If you have any questions about firewalls or networks or anything in your small business, send us an email, support@itproiowa.com. Call us at 319-227-7000. Again, my name's Adam with IT Professionals of Iowa. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next week.